Hi everybody and welcome to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And I'm pretty pleased because today we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite subjects.
Now what would that be?
You know me pretty well.
What would that be? Football?
Would have been one, but no.
No. Fantasy novels. The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that would have been a good one too. No, it's not that either.
Okay, is it something that starts with the letter R?
Pretty much.
Kind of.
Pirates start with an R.
That's right. The P, but there's an R in there.
That's right. We be talking about pirates in today's class.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that you quite like reading some of pirate history.
Sure, I like history. Yep. Sailing ships are always interesting too. So pirates, history, sailing ships, and all sorts of good fun.
Yep, I am hugely, one might say, obsessed with pirates. I love reading about them. I enjoy writing about them.
Wow.
I like to dress up as a pirate. I still use my Facebook account in pirate English.
Really?
Yes, I don't like people's posts. I say R to them.
Oh, okay. So this is a special Facebook thing that you use?
You used to be able to change. You have, British English, Chinese, American English. You could pick pirate English.
He likes pirates.
I do. I've had that for a long time. But which pirate and what kind of pirates are we going to be talking about today? The classic ones. We're going to the golden age of piracy. And one of the biggest figures from that, today we're going to learn about Blackbeard.
Reading.
Blackbeard and the Golden Age of Piracy. Edward Teach, or Blackbeard, is probably the most famous pirate of all time. We don't know much about Teach's early life. He was English, and according to some stories, he was a sailor who fought bravely in wars. Later, Teach became a pirate and joined forces with several others. He soon led a powerful fleet and was feared throughout the Americas. It was with this fleet that Blackbeard carried out his boldest and most successful act. In 1718, Blackbeard's ships blocked the entrance to Charlestown in what is now the U.S. He robbed every ship that tried to flee and refused to leave until he was paid with supplies. However, being a pirate became harder, and Teach accepted a pardon from the British government. This meant his crimes were forgiven as long as he behaved. His pirates likely continued to attack ships, though, as soldiers were sent to capture him. In Blackbeard's last battle, he was shot and stabbed many times. His head was cut off. According to one legend, his ghost continues to search for it.
Okay, so our article begins by introducing today's pirate. Edward Teach, or Blackbeard, is probably the most famous pirate of all time. The word probably means most likely. So what we're saying here is if you asked any ordinary person, name a famous pirate.
Jack Sparrow.
That is a famous but not a real one.
That's true.
Of course. But if we ask them to name a real one, Blackbeard is going to be maybe 80 or 90% of what most people will answer. So he's most likely, he's almost certainly. We don't know for sure, which is why we use probably rather than exactly or definitely, but it's the most likely thing people will say. Here's another way we can use this adverb. Don't forget your umbrella. It will probably rain this afternoon.
And if it's probably going to rain, you definitely want to have that umbrella with you. If it doesn't, that's not a big deal. All right, so yes, Blackbeard is probably the most famous real pirate that most people have heard of and could name. Edward Teach, though, was Blackbeard's real name. Did you know that? I bet most people didn't. And there's so much more about this famous pirate that we don't really know. For example, it says we don't know much about Teach's early life. Of course, when we say Teach, we're meaning Blackbeard. That was his pirate name, but his real name was Edward Teach. And yeah, well, I mean, this often happens with people from a long time ago. We know what happened when they became famous, after they did something very, very famous or well known. But what they were like before, their early life as young people or children, often we don't know. So Blackbeard, where did he go to school? Was he a good student? We don't really know this stuff.
Unlikely.
Not.
We do know some things. The article says he was English.
Okay.
And according to some stories, he was a sailor who fought bravely in wars.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
He was a pirate. He worked on a boat. And how do you learn how to be a pirate and sword fight? By being a soldier or a sailor who fights in wars.
That's right. Now, we used according to in this sentence. We use according to as a phrase when we want to show the source for a particular fact or a piece of information. So, according to stories, so basically the only thing we know about Blackbeard is what's written down in books, and most of those were just stories that were heard from other pirates, sailors, people who lived in that part of the world at that time. Somebody wrote some of them down, and that's where our information comes from. So here we are pretty sure he was English, born in England, somewhere around the Bristol area, and he was probably a sailor.
Okay, well, a lot of people were back then. And what is a sailor? A sailor is basically a crew member or someone who works on a boat or a ship. It's a very general term, and often, we have more careful or more precise names for these different jobs that the sailors might do on the boat. But generally, if your job is working on a boat or a ship, you are a sailor, especially if you're in the Navy, if you're in the fighting forces that go on water. Soldiers are on land in the Army. Sailors are in boats and ships on water in the Navy. You could also be a sailor if you're working on some kind of pleasure ship or a cruise ship or something like that. But as I said, these days we might call someone by their specific job, the navigator, the radio operator, the cook. But generally all these people are working on a boat, so technically they could all be sailors. But not the captain. If you're the boss of the boat, you're the captain, you wouldn't be a sailor. For example, the sailors spent the morning cleaning the decks of the ship.
Okay.
Sailors do a lot of cleaning and taking care of boats.
Yes,
ships.
otherwise the boat sinks.
That's bad.
So, we know Teach was English, he was probably a sailor, he probably fought in some wars as part of the English Navy.
Okay.
Now we're getting into the part of his life we know more about. The article says later, Teach became a pirate and joined forces with several others. So he's like, okay, you guys, you're pirates, I want to be a pirate, let's go.
Cool.
And that's what we mean by join forces. When you join forces, you work together with one or more than one other people or persons. You combine your resources, your abilities. So maybe if you work together, you're stronger or richer or smarter than if you were alone. The most obvious example is the Avengers, a whole group of superheroes joining forces to save the world. So, Blackbeard and some other very famous pirates, you can look them up at some point, they got together, joined forces.
Wow, so a big pirate army. Well, not exactly. We read on to say he soon led a powerful fleet and was feared throughout the Americas. That's right, if we have a lot of soldiers working together, we might call that an army. Thousands of soldiers and tanks and trucks going off to fight a battle. But if it's a bunch of ships or boats on the water going off to do something, fight a battle or just travel together somewhere, we would call that collection or that group of boats or ships a fleet. All right, so if you look outside on an important day like Double 10 Day down in Kaohsiung, the Taiwanese fleet, Navy fleet, might join up there to sort of sail past and, do a little show for the tourists. But basically it's just a big group of ships that are connected in some way, going the same place, doing the same job, and that group is a fleet.
Yep, and Blackbeard's fleet were feared throughout the Americas. Throughout means everywhere, all over, in all parts of a particular place. The Americas would mean North, Central, South America, and the islands of the Caribbean Sea. So that's when we say the Americas, that's where we mean. And pretty much up and down those coasts, you'd heard the name of Blackbeard, you were scared of him. Here's another example of throughout. You don't need a car in Amsterdam because there are bicycle paths throughout the city, so all over the city.
Okay, not just in certain areas, but everywhere. So this gives us the idea that Blackbeard wasn't just famous and scaring people and attacking ships in one small part. He traveled north, south, east, west, depending on the time of year. He could be anywhere, so look out. And it was with this fleet, this pirate fleet, it was with this fleet that Blackbeard carried out his boldest and most successful act. Wow.
So in that sentence, we use today's grammar pattern. This uses it, followed by the be verb and a clause, followed by a that and another clause. Now this grammar point is used to emphasize a particular part or detail of an overall sentence. So we could say that Blackbeard and this fleet carried out this bold act of piracy, but by putting the it was with this fleet, by emphasizing this fleet of ships, we're giving it more importance and saying that without this fleet, this act that Blackbeard did may not have been possible. It's a writing trick, basically, we can use to focus on certain parts of sentences and make them more important. For example, we could say, I met my girlfriend in this coffee shop. This is fine. But if we say, it was in this coffee shop that I met my girlfriend, we're giving more focus on the coffee shop and making it the key part of the sentence. And here's another example. It was with my teacher's help that I was able to pass the difficult exam. So using this fleet, this group of ships, Blackbeard carried out a very bold act.
That's right. If you're a pirate, you'll definitely need to be bold, because if you're bold, you're brave, you're aggressive, you're not going to let anything stop you. You will do things that other people might go, I couldn't do that, because you're definitely not shy. You're definitely not going to stand in the corner and go, no, I don't really want to. You're going to be right out there in front. You're going to be the leader. You're going to be the brave one. You're going to be showing other people how it's done by taking your courage and going for it. For example, it was bold of Lydia to walk up to the school bully and then start shouting at him. He's really big, she's really small, but she's very brave and bold. She didn't let anything stop her. So, what was this bold act that Blackbeard and his fleet performed or did? What did they do?
Well, in 1718,
a good year.
Blackbeard's ships blocked the entrance to Charlestown in what is now the US.
He attacked a city in the US?
Of course. Well, it wasn't the US. This was before the US, and Charlestown is now called Charleston in South Carolina.
But a fairly important place.
Yeah, and so normally we think of pirates attacking a ship. Here, he basically robbed an entire city.
Wow, so like pirates come to Geelong and run in there and take everyone's cell phones and money and run away, and we're all just like, what happened?
Yeah.
That's kind of what he did.
Yeah, and he started by blocking the entrance so no other ships could get in or out.
Okay, that makes sense, and pirates and navies used to fight in that way back then. And so what did he do? Well, basically he stole from everyone he could. He robbed every ship that tried to flee and refused to leave until he was paid with supplies. So there you go. He was basically standing at the front door, and if you wanted to come through the door, you had to pay him to get through. And if you said please and thank you, it wouldn't matter, because he was there to rob people and become rich doing it. What is it to rob? This verb basically means to steal from people. All right, if you're a robber, you're a thief. You're someone who steals things. And if you were robbed, someone using possibly violence or maybe just threatening you, or maybe when you weren't even there, comes into your home or stops you on the street or breaks into your car or opens your bag when you're not around and they take things out they're not allowed to because they're stealing from you. They're robbing you. For example, a burglar broke into the jewelry store and robbed it last night. Kind of like Blackbeard, looking for diamonds and gold and stuff like that.
Yep, and so any ship that tried to flee was robbed. Flee means to run away, it means to escape, and we especially use it when you do it at a fast speed. We don't say you flee slowly, you always go quickly.
That's right.
So that was Blackbeard's greatest act, but things didn't end well for Edward Teach.
Exactly. If you go around robbing people, eventually someone will notice, the police will get involved, and they'll make it their goal to catch you. So that's kind of what happened. However, being a pirate became harder, and Teach accepted a pardon from the British government. Wow. So this is back in the old days before they had, police and court systems and lawyers and jails like we do. So one of the things the British government did was, instead of trying to chase these guys and catch them, which could be impossible or could take years, they basically put out a message that says, if you come in and say sorry, we'll be okay with that. We will pardon you. And as a verb, when we say this word to pardon someone, we're basically saying someone did something bad to me, but I'm telling them it's okay. I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to try to get you in trouble. I'm kind of saying I could, but I won't because I want us to be friends, so I will pardon you. I will say, don't worry about it. It's okay. A pardon, when we use it as a noun, is basically the same thing, but it might be something that you say. For example, if you say, you really hurt my feelings, but I will still choose to be your friend. That is a pardon. Or it could be a piece of paper that lawyers or someone from the government might write out so that they give it to you. So if anyone says, you did that crime, I read it in the newspaper, you can say, no, I didn't. I got a pardon. They caught the right person years later. It happens occasionally. For example, David always said that he didn't commit the crime, and after 7 years in jail, he was finally given a pardon and set free. Well, I'm glad justice was served.
Okay, and as the article explains, this meant his, Blackbeard's, crimes were forgiven as long as he behaved.
He was pardoned.
Yeah, you might wonder, well, how can you give a guy who robbed a city a pardon? But as Mike said, England or Britain was fighting France and Spain and lots of other countries. They didn't want to have to fight pirates as well. They figured the best way to stop all the pirates was pardon a lot of them, and as long as you behave, we won't punish you, and therefore that's one less thing for us to deal with. The key thing here was, it was as long as they behaved. As long as is a phrase that's used to state a condition that must be met in order for something else to happen. You can go out with your friends as long as you finish your homework, for example.
Okay, it's kind of like if,
yes.
Right? He'll be pardoned if he's good for the rest of his life and doesn't attack any more cities. Well, the article tells us his pirates likely continued to attack ships, though, as soldiers were sent to capture him. So right at that time, you might have said, okay, I'll be a good pirate. I won't attack any more cities. But eventually people get bored. They run out of money. They see that ship over there that's fat with gold and diamonds, and they go back to their bad and evil ways. And that's kind of what happened to Blackbeard and his pirates.
Yeah, you can read it online. It does get more complicated with who wanted to stop him and why, but they kind of felt we can't just have this pirate here. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So the soldiers went in, and we see that in Blackbeard's last battle, he was shot and stabbed many times.
Wow, he went down fighting.
Oh, how. It was a very violent fight, and he was stabbed, which means he was pierced by something sharp. We use stab with things like a knife, a sword, anything with a sharp point you stab somebody with. So yeah, people were stabbing him, people were shooting him. And that's not even how it ended.
No, it finally ended when his head was cut off. That is definitely one way to stop a pirate, or pretty much anyone. By cutting off their head, they will, of course, die instantly, basically. Yeah.
Or will they? Because according to one legend, his ghost continues to search for it.
The headless ghost of Blackbeard?
Oh, it's such a great story. There's another use, by the way, of according to. We've got according to this legend, this particular story. Blackbeard's ghost wanders the 7 seas looking for his head, which was cut off, and the people who did it kind of put it on their boat and took it back to their boss and said, look, we got him. There you go. But apparently, according to legend, Blackbeard is still searching for it. A legend is an old story. Some legends, they have a little bit of truth to them, but other legends, this one in particular, could be completely made up.
Oh, okay.
In fact, the whole pirate idea back then was mostly based on legend. Pirates made legends up about themselves that they used to scare other people so that when they wanted to take a ship and rob it, people were so scared by all these legends and stories that they just gave up without a fight, because the pirates didn't always want to fight. They just wanted to rob people peacefully.
It's true. If you gave up and just gave them your gold, they were very happy about
that.
Yep,
and they wouldn't kill you either. It was kind of a nice deal, so if you are attacked by a pirate, probably the best thing to do is let him have what he wants.
Arr,
indeed. Now, we will talk a bit more about different pirates and the whole history of that age in part 2 of our article tomorrow, but right now we're going to our For You chat question.
For You chat.
Okay, so Blackbeard, one of the most famous pirates of all time, a famous historical figure. But Mike, which famous historical figures are you interested in, and why?
Wow, that's a great question. It kind of depends on what I'm reading or what I'm watching or what's going on in my life. Right now I'm reading a big book about a very interesting famous historical figure named Thomas Cromwell. He's from English history and he worked for Henry VIII.
Yep.
That famous big fat English king who had six wives. Well, Thomas Cromwell, unlike almost anyone at that time, was born poor. His father wasn't a lord or didn't have land. His father actually was a butcher who just worked in a bad part of London. But Cromwell was young and very, very intelligent. He went off to Europe as a soldier. He learned how to do lots of things from politics to economics. And he came back and he was basically the second most powerful person in England at that time. And he was just a normal guy from the street. So he helped Henry with all of his private life, and all of his private problems and money problems. It ended up kind of making a lot of enemies for Thomas Cromwell, and he kind of lost his head later on too. But that's another story. But it was interesting because he really did kind of rise from nothing when at that time you had to be powerful to be important, but he just became important because he was smart.
Yeah, interesting. I am, as I said in the introduction, fascinated by pirates. So any stories concerning one of the pirates from this particular age is interesting. I won't mention their names. We'll meet some of them tomorrow, but I'll give you a few names to whet your appetite. In fact, Charles Vane, Calico Jack, Benjamin Hornigold, Bartholomew Roberts. These are fascinating figures for me. We'll learn a bit about them tomorrow, so join us for that. We'll see you then. Bye.
Take care.
Blackbeard and the Golden Age of Piracy. Edward Teach, or Blackbeard, is probably the most famous pirate of all time. We don't know much about Teach's early life. He was English, and according to some stories, he was a sailor who fought bravely in wars. Later, Teach became a pirate and joined forces with several others. He soon led a powerful fleet and was feared throughout the Americas. It was with this fleet that Blackbeard carried out his boldest and most successful act. In 1718, Blackbeard's ships blocked the entrance to Charlestown in what is now the U.S. He robbed every ship that tried to flee and refused to leave until he was paid with supplies. However, being a pirate became harder, and Teach accepted a pardon from the British government. This meant his crimes were forgiven as long as he behaved. His pirates likely continued to attack ships, though, as soldiers were sent to capture him. In Blackbeard's last battle, he was shot and stabbed many times. His head was cut off. According to one legend, his ghost continues to search for it.
Vocabulary Review.
Probably. I'll probably go to Tokyo for my vacation, but I'll decide later. Sailor. Johnny spent months sailing around the Pacific, and in every port he met other interesting sailors. Throughout. The typhoon brought heavy rain and wind throughout Taiwan during the weekend. Bold. Everyone said Larry was bold to point out the teacher's mistake in the middle of class. Rob. Julie got home and noticed her window was broken and that her TV was missing. Someone had robbed her house. Pardon. Alan was put in prison for being gay, but the president changed the law and gave him a pardon.
智慧小补帖
Fleet. Flee. Stab. Legend.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net